Hi guys, this is Dr. Gonzalez, and I'm going to walk you through your research project proposal paper. This video is to help you understand what I'm looking for in the paper, what components you've already written, and what components you're going to need to start from scratch writing as we approach the end of this semester here. So I've provided you with a template, and it has been pre-formatted to APA standards. That means it's got the correct spacing, it has the correct font, all of the components of the paper are there. And in essence, all you really need to do is open it up, highlight the text you want to get rid of, and start typing. Now, that doesn't mean that you could accidentally change settings, so please be careful as you are working and try not to change the settings, okay? That's also why we teach APA, so that if you do, you know what you're looking for. And there's a point in this video where I will go through those components again to remind you, okay? The one thing that I really want you to do is to check your line spacing before you start writing, because this is the most frequent thing that I see in your submissions. The line spacing sometimes gets off, and mainly that's because Word, and I'm going to show y'all here by opening up Word likes to do its own thing. And you've probably got your own template in Word. When I open up mine right here, this is my own pre-formatted template. I have a different font from the normal Word standard. But if you go under this right here where it says paragraph settings, right here is the major problem. You see where it says the spacing after lines is 8 points? This is what happens. So if I type a line here, it looks like this, right? And I'm going to make it bigger so you can see a little closer what I'm talking about here. When I hit enter, look, it almost looks double spaced, right? That's because it put an 8 point of spacing between that. And we don't want that, because that's not something we use in APA. What we do use in APA is double spacing. So to accurately get this right here to reflect APA, I would need to go in here and change this to 0 and then change that to double. Now, when I hit enter, it's going to do that, and it put me a full good space down. Okay, so what I want you to do before you do your paper, before you start messing with a template, I want you to go under that paragraph menu like I just showed you, select that down arrow. It's going to open up the paragraph menu, and under line spacing, I want you to make sure that double is selected, and that your before, whoa, was not expecting that, guys, so sorry, that your before and after spacing are both set at 0. So here's what we just did. When you open up the template right here, you're going to right there click that. It's going to open up the paragraph menu right here, and you're going to make sure that before and after are both set at 0 and that your line spacing is double. Okay, do that and you should be good with regard to spacing. Okay, let's get into the meat and bones of the paper. So what I've done is I have taken screenshots of the components as they're opened in Word, and we're going to walk through what you should and shouldn't include in each one of those sections. So the first part of the paper is the title page. And many of you are familiar with the idea of a running head. There's usually in papers something up here that says running head, and then it's got, you know, a shortened version of your title. That's not necessary to include in student papers using APA format. So I did not include it in this template. So you do not need to go in and add it. What you do need to do is leave the page numbers alone, because those are important. And you need to replace some information here. You'll see that the title of your project is in parentheses. not parentheses, it's in quotation marks. I apologize. It's been a long day, guys. And it's bold. So leave the quotation marks and insert whatever your project title is. It can be a title like sleep and electronic devices. That'd be great. It could also be your research question. I really don't care. It doesn't have to be fancy, okay? You're going to leave the rest of the title page exactly as is, except for under student name, I would like you to write your name, obviously, okay? The next thing you're going to see in the paper template is the abstract. And an abstract is a very brief description of the study. Just like you would see an abstract for a journal article, right? You're probably going to wait until the end of your paper to write your abstract because it's an abstract of everything in the paper, right? So it's not one of those things you can just kind of whip out at the beginning and knock out of the way. So the format on the page is already correct. It's double spaced. There is no indentation here, okay? You're going to give me a brief description of your study, okay? Tell me the highlights, why you were proposing it, because there has to be a reason, right? It's important to a component of psychology. There's a gap in the research. Why is this important, okay? You need to tell me that. You need to tell me your general methodology. And by general methodology, I need you to highlight that this is a non-experimental or a correlational research study, okay? You're going to tell me your hypotheses, not using the null and alternative format, just in a sentence. It is hypothesized that. All right? You tell me your data analysis plan. We will analyze this. This data will be analyzed using a Pearson's correlation with the p-level less than 0.05. I will reject the null if I find this. I will retain the null if I find that. Okay? And then you want to talk about any potential conclusions that you might find. The point is that this is brief, short, and very to the point. It should not be longer than 150 words. So to give you a reference here, the paragraph in the abstract that I wrote in the template has 67 words. So if you doubled that, that would approximately be what an abstract should be. It's a little over, but it's not going to be the end of the world if it is over. I would say shoot for 150 to 200 words. Anything over 200 words is probably too much. Okay, so remember, this is probably something you want to write at the end after you have finished your paper in general. Next, you're going to move into the introduction and lit review. This should be an easy component for you to incorporate into your template because we've already done this portion. All you really need to do is go back through and incorporate any feedback that I gave you. And there were some of you who got significant feedback, right? At minimum, you needed to have 5 sources. And I would really say 5 to 10 would be a better goal, somewhere between those. And that's including one source for the measure that you're going to use later on. But this should be an easy component. The title right here is going to match the title that you put on the front of your paper, right? The first section is the introduction / literature review. Now you'll notice that all we have is this title heading right here. I don't have another subheader right like here that says introduction. And that's because APA assumes that the first paragraph you write after that title is the introduction. And the introduction also includes the literature review. So we don't need to include a header because it's implied. You should have written this already. You're really going to make sure you've incorporated any feedback that I gave you, and you're going to put this in here, okay? If you decide to copy and paste from your other assignment, please copy and paste using right-click, paste text only option. If you go in and try to paste something and just hit Control V, or you select this little thing right here, it tries to bring in the format of whatever it is that you're trying to put put there. The second option merges the two formats together. The last option, this one pastes it as a picture. We don't want that. This one right here is what you want because it's just preserving the text. Okay. All right. Make sure that you cover the elements that were required in the original assignment, which is basically a summation of the literature out there, what we know, where the gaps are, and why this is important for you to be proposing this study. And then you're going to, towards the end, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 paragraphs, or you should have 3 or 4 paragraphs there. I would say at minimum 3. But your final paragraph, you need to introduce your research question, and then you're going to end with your hypotheses. And I don't want them written in that null alternative format. They are written in a paper format, which should look something kind of like this. So it's hypothesized that using electronic devices immediately before sleep is correlated with worse sleep quality and shorter duration. Okay, that's a hypothesis statement that tells the reader what we're hypothesizing without specifically stating, here is my null, here is my alternative. The next section of your paper is the methodology section, or the method section. So you'll notice at the top, I've got another header saying method. And the method actually has several subcomponents. And the first one is going to be your study design. Before you start writing, I want you to go through and read the paragraphs really carefully, because these paragraphs in the template tell you information about what you need to be writing there. Okay? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to start with talking about your research question again. And you're going to write it in a format that is something like this. Are variables XXX and XX associated? Or however you wrote your research question. Okay? Then you're going to describe that this is non-experimental, because this course is non-experimental. And you're going to propose your research question and your rationale for the method that you're using. Are you doing a survey? Are you observing somebody and collecting data? Just tell me about it. So let's talk about my example that I've used several times in this course, which is electronic device use associated with sleep quality and duration. So in that particular study, I would probably be gathering 2 kinds of data. Survey data or measurement data, maybe using something like the PSYC, and then maybe I incorporate an actual component where I am gathering data using an Apple Watch in order to track, say, number of nighttime awakenings, or how many times a person goes through deep sleep versus light sleep. So I would tell my reader that I'm doing a combination, that in my research design, my participants are answering measurement tools designed to gather data on their sleep quality, and I'm using an actual active component to gather data related to their sleep quality. Now remember, this is non-experimental, and that's okay. You can do what I'm proposing, what I'm telling you, without this being an experiment. It would become an experiment if I manipulated something, and I'm not manipulating anything here. So in essence, it is also observational. But the bottom line is, I want you to tell me about your study's design, and I want you to justify why you decided to do it that way. Remember, your study has to be non-experimental and correlational, which, as I just told y'all, that means that it is not manipulating a variable, and it does not have random sampling, which that will come up later under your sampling plan. Let me get my mouse out. This is just not working out with this trackpad. So, all right. Let me get back situated here. Okay. Now, if you noticed here, your study design was the first thing. You should probably have 1 to 2 nice sized paragraphs here. Remember, a paragraph needs to have 3 to 4 sentences, has a thesis statement in it, and then you support that thesis statement. Your next section of the method section is going to be your variables and operational definitions, which again should have been included in your variables and validity assignment. Okay? Both components of that assignment are going to be incorporated into this paper. So you're going to at least have 2 paragraphs here. You might have to supplement it. You may not be able to go and just copy and paste what you had from your assignment, but you should have the meat and bones of it, right? You're going to start by talking about your variables in the context of an independent and a dependent variable, okay? So, for example, in my sleep study, it would be the independent variable is using electronic devices, and my dependent variables would be sleep quality and sleep duration. And you're going to justify that, right? I can't talk about quality of sleep if I don't know what specific components are being measured underneath that. So I need to make sure that I'm talking about all of the variables there. And you're going to get into that with your second paragraph. In that one, you're going to provide operational definitions for all of your variables, including any controls that you might decide to include. I highly suggest you review control variables. That was back in the module about variables way back at the beginning of the course, but we need to know about those if you're going to successfully write this paper. We need to know that maybe in my sleep study I don't want to include people who have been diagnosed with a sleep disorder, or I might not want to include people who are taking prescription medications not for sleep but for some other reason that might cause them to sleep strangely. I don't know. Just make sure you operationally define all of those variables that you are measuring inside of your research project, right? Justify it to me. Why? Why are those variables the ones that you are operationalizing? Why are they important? Tell me about it. And be aware your assignment, like I said, might not have gone into great detail, so you might need to beef it up a bit, and that's totally okay. This is the place to elaborate. The next section you'll see in the template is the hypotheses section. You should have most of the information, if not all of it, in your null and alternative hypothesis assignment, or your hypotheses assignment, I believe is what it was titled. You're going to start again by restating that research question, okay? And then you're going to follow the format that I have for you in the template, incorporating any feedback that you got from me on the assignment. I also remember on this particular assignment, there were several of you that got significant feedback. Please incorporate it. If you just copy what you wrote the first time, and what you wrote the first time wasn't right, then you're not making any improvement. So I want you to go in and talk like an introductory statement here. You know, this research project is going to have 1 null and 1 alternative hypothesis. Here they are, right? So you're going to write your null, and usually that starts out with the wording there. There's no difference between variable X and variable Y, or variable X and variable Y are not correlated, or there is no significant correlation between. All right. And your alternative is going to be that there is a difference. Remember, if you've got a one-tailed or a two-tailed or a directional hypothesis, this would be where you would put that there. I also, when you've got it written, I want you to go in and remove the lovely highlighting that I have here. You know, just highlight it with your mouse and then go back up to the highlighting portion and select the clear option or the white option. The next portion of your methodology or your methods section is going to tell me about your participants in sampling. This should come from your sampling assignment, but before you add that stuff about the sampling method, you're going to need to go in and talk about your population, okay? So tell me, why did you decide to study teenagers or elderly patients or domestic violence survivors? I don't know what whoever your population is, highlight that population. This is an underserved population. This population has not been studied very much. Tell me why and who they are and define them for me. Then in your second paragraph, pick one of the sampling techniques that you talked about in your assignment. You proposed 2, pick one, and tell me how you're going to sample your participants. Make sure you include any feedback that you got from your assignment in your paper. This should be a pretty short section, okay? 2 nice paragraphs, you should have it done. Next, you're going to go into your measurement tool or tools. All right, you need to have at least 2 paragraphs here. In the first paragraph, I want you to tell me what demographic data and descriptive data you're going to collect from your population. So basically, anything that is not going to be included in your measure that you're using, right? So in my sleep study, I'm going to use the PSYC right here, the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. That tells me one thing. It does not tell me everything I need to collect from my sample, right? I was talking about sleep duration and sleep quality, and maybe one of the variables that I'm specifically looking at is nighttime awakenings. I don't believe nighttime awakenings is collected as a specific submeasure in the PSYC, so that would be where I'm bringing in that Apple Watch data. So up here in that first paragraph, this would be where I would talk about gathering other data. That is a descriptive variable, right? It's describing a phenomena in my sample, which is nighttime awakenings. So it wasn't included in the measure, so I need to make sure that I'm doing it here. So just tell me that. Tell me all the things that you're planning on looking at in a survey, right? I'm not asking you to write a survey. I know you guys did, and technically that survey could be attached as an addendum to this paper. That would be the real world. Wonderful. But I'm not asking you to do that here. But I do want you to tell me about what you would gather. The second paragraph is a little bit easier. This is where you're going to tell me about that measure that you researched in your measures assignment. Okay? I asked you to find a measure that you could use in your project and to provide a citation for it. So make sure you have that measure cited correctly with an in-text citation, right? And then include it in your references list. Next, you're going to move into the validity section. This should be super easy. We covered this in the variables and validity assignment. Most of you guys, the only feedback that I had for that was that you didn't write enough. Some of you guys wrote 1 sentence about, I'm going to make sure it's statistically valid. That wasn't enough. You need to address them in detail. You should have 4 paragraphs. You're going to cover 1 validity per paragraph. Okay? If you've got a trade-off between external validity and statistical validity or whatever, talk about it here. You're going to address internal, external, statistical, and construct validity. Okay? So make sure you've adequately covered them. You've written a nice paragraph. You didn't just say, I'm going to address it, and then not tell me how you're going to address it. So now is the time to elaborate. Now is the time to write more. Next, you move into one of the big parts of this paper, excuse me, that we have not covered. This is the procedure section, okay? It's a new part. In the procedure section, you provide the reader with a detailed, thorough description of your procedures you would actually implement to carry out the project. So it goes from IRB all the way through collecting data. Okay? You can have as many paragraphs as you want. You can talk as much as you want. In fact, the more descriptive you are, the better I understand your project. Okay? So I want you to describe what you would do step by step, and I want you to start with stating that before this research is conducted, it will be approved by the Institutional Review Board, the IRB of the University of Houston, Clear Lake, whatever. Okay? Once that permission is obtained, then you move into telling me, using the sampling method above, I will recruit participants from, and tell me, I guess, a little bit about where. But once you've got them, are they coming in to take the survey? Are you mailing the survey? Are you directing them to a website to take the survey? Whatever they're doing, tell me step by step. You also, before you say, I'm going to have them answer these surveys using Qualtrics, you need to tell me that you have reviewed the informed consent process with them. You would say something like, all participants will receive and review an informed consent document provided by the researcher. Participants will be allowed to ask any questions. Participants will be allowed to leave. You don't have to go over everything you would put in that IRB, in that informed consent, but you could hit a couple of the highlights. Sometimes researchers reimburse. They give like a gift card for participation. That would be something you would need to mention there. But the bottom line is, you're going to tell me how you're going to collect that data in a very detailed manner. I also want you to include how you might protect the data that you collect. Are your participants using are you going to give them an ID number instead of their name? Where you're going to house the data. Are you going to keep it on a hard drive, on a flash drive? Is it going to be locked up somewhere? Normally, data is kept for 7 years after a research project is conducted. You might need to go research, do a little Googling out there to find out what particular things you might need to do. But I would suggest anonymity, right? We're going to give them a code, an ID code. And then something to the lines of, data will be stored at the University of Houston. It will be kept in a lock and key, etc. So this should be a pretty long section in your paper, and it should have a lot of different parts. And this is, a lot of paragraphs. Not a lot, but you know what I mean, as compared to the other sections. But this is where you really get to shine. You get to tell me how you're going to carry this out. So the more detailed and thorough you are, the less questions I will have, the better I'll understand what you're trying to do, and the better your grade will be. Now, don't tell me how you're going to analyze the data. That's going to come in the next section. So in this part, in the procedure, you're going from IRB, recruitment, collecting data, and then you stop. The next part of the paper is your analytic plan. This is also another section that we have not gone over, mainly because we're just now getting into the statistics of the course. This is going to be a proposal and not an actual paper, so you're not going to have any data to analyze, but you can tell me what you would do in detail to analyze it, right? Tell me what descriptive statistics you're going to run. I want to know in my sleep study what the mean number of hours that my participants were sleeping each night, what the mean number of devices are that they're using before bed, how long they're on those devices. This is where your survey would come in, okay? I want you to tell me what measures of central tendency you might use, which mainly is going to be the mean, right? That's your descriptive part. You're also going to have a inferential section, okay? You can be as free as you want with the frequencies and descriptive statistics. Just remember that just like this survey, we don't collect data that we're not going to use. So make sure that your frequencies or your descriptives that you're going to collect and present, that they would actually add meaning to your paper. For your inferential statistics, you're only going to have one, and it's going to be your Pearson's correlation, because for this particular semester of this course, I decided to lock you guys in on a Pearson's correlation to make everybody be on the same page. I want you to tell me, using that Pearson's correlation, when you would retain and reject the null. If you're confused about what that might mean, I highly suggest you go back and rewatch the presentation from the week about correlations, and watch the presentation about descriptive statistics. I believe in there it talks about the hypothesis testing. You're going to use a p-level of p is less than 0.05. So what that means is, if I get a Pearson's correlation that has a corresponding P level of, say, let me change this right here. Say my P is equal to 0.03. That is definitely less than 0.05. In that case, what do? I reject the null. There is a significant correlation. I would expect this R right here to be close to like 0.9 or negative 0.9. Okay? So what does that mean when it comes down to your null, to retaining it and rejecting it? Tell me that over here. Okay? Now right here, it's highlighting again descriptive statistics, but your inferential is going to be your Pearson, and I want you to use P is less than 0.05 to make your decision. Also, describe if you're using one-tailed versus two-tailed here, how that's going to affect your analysis of the data. The final section of your paper before the references is going to be your discussion. Normally, this is where we would discuss the data that you've just analyzed. You didn't collect any data, so what are you going to do? You're going to talk about what you would do depending on the outcome of your analytic plan. So basically, if your results supported your alternative hypothesis, how does that help us understand human behavior? Right? In my sleep study, it helps me understand more about the relationship between two variables, because that's what correlation is. It's a relationship between variable X and variable Y. If it doesn't support the alternative hypothesis, how does that help us? Because we don't know. It could go either way here. We haven't collected any data. So talk about how each of those scenarios would be handled and what it would mean. I also want you to tell me about the possible limitations of your study. And the big one that you are all going to have, that you should all include, is that this research study is non-experimental. The gold standard in psychological research is an experiment. That is where I can actually delve in and look at that relationship between two variables. And in an experiment, I'm manipulating one of those variables to see if there is a direct change in the other variable, right? The dependent variable. We're not doing that. We're just looking at two variables that are already existing out there and determining if there's an association between those two. So that in and of itself is a limitation, and you should definitely include that as a limitation. You should also talk about how working with a specific sample is not always representative of the entire population. Tell me the limits of it. And you can go out there and Google what are the different limitations of a non-experimental study. Look at those examples and then incorporate that in your paper. That is different from going over to AI and telling it to generate a list of limitations for my research study. Be careful there, and I'm going to address the AI use later in this video, okay? Also, I want you to tell me what the next step might be, and the next step might be an experiment. And that would be great. That's how research works, okay? You should have maybe 4 or 5 short paragraphs ending with a conclusion paragraph that, kind of sums up. It restates the research question, it restates your hypotheses, and then it kind of concludes with, something alluding to the fact that this research is important and it should be done. Finally, you're going to have your references page. Please, in the template, delete all of this right here when you've written your first reference. So I want you to stick your cursor right here, hit enter, and start with that first reference right there. After you've written that first reference, highlight all this text right here and hit delete. Okay? The formatting should be preserved. You've got a hanging indent. Let me get rid of all of this highlighting here. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, I can't get rid of it. Oh, that one's in there. My bad. I can't get rid of that one. That's in the template. So let's go through some of the problems that I see in this course this year that have me concerned. We've had several assignments where you've been asked to write references. And I still have people consistently writing them incorrectly. You have an APA style guide. That was a required book for this course. Independent of whether or not you bought that book, there are tons of reference materials on the internet that can help you formatting your references correctly. Okay? We've gone over this. You should know it. If you don't, this is the last push to really get it done. Okay? Make sure you cite all of your paper, the references that you have cited in text in your paper. Make sure that they are here. If I see Arahoni in and Gazette T in my reference list right here, there should be an in-text citation. Arahoni, etc., et al., 2017, whatever. That should be somewhere in your paper. You never include a reference in the reference section if it's not in the paper. And if it's in the paper, it better be included in the reference section. Be careful. These are easy points here. You should know this by now. If you don't, this is the last time to get it. Okay? Make sure your references are in alphabetical order. Make sure there's not an extra space between the references. That's why we went back at the beginning and took out that after and before spacing. So let's go down the list of the rubric real quick, and I am going to go over the parts of a citation again later in this presentation. But starting with the abstract, you get 5 points for the abstract, and that should be easy peasy. Just keep it under 150 words, or 150 to 200 would be fine. Make sure you cover all the points of it that are in the rubric right there. Introduction should be one of the easiest sections because you should have written everything already for a previous assignment. Just make sure you include feedback. Make sure that your empirical literature is included. Make sure you're identifying a gap. Make sure that's leading to your research question and hypothesis. Make sure that your hypothesis is written in this section. It's going to be written in a generic sentence form. It needs to be testable and non-experimental. Procedure section, most of these components you have already written, so it shouldn't be too much. There should be the procedure that you really need to focus on. Just make sure that you have included any feedback for the hypotheses, the participants, your sampling, your operational definitions, your measurement tools, and your validity assignments. Notice that this is one of the bigger sections in weight. It's 25 points that you can earn there. Your analytic plan, this is the other portion that you that you're going to need to focus on that we haven't written before. It's worth 10 points. Just remember the points that I have highlighted in this video. Tell me about your descriptive statistics, your frequencies that you would be reporting, and then your inferential statistic has to be Pearson's R. Ignore this right here where it says demonstrates understanding. Well, no, not that one. There was another one. I'm sorry, I thought this was my rubric from last year and I didn't fix something, but it is not in here. Everybody's going to have Pearson's R. That's it. There should be no other inferential statistic mentioned. Follow the directions for the discussion and you should be fine. This is kind of a point where you get to just highlight what are the limitations, what would be the next logical steps in future research. I'm looking for insightfulness and things that are realistic. Now, there's two parts of the rubric that focus on APA formatting. The template's pre-formatted. Don't mess with the settings. You should be okay. But if you do mess with the settings, you need to know the basics of APA. It needs to be double-spaced. We're using a 12-point font, preferably Times New Roman. You've got in-text citations of your sources. Those in-text citations are listed as references at the end. Your margins should all be set. Like the headings, none of that you need to mess with. Now, because citing references is very important, I included it as a separate component of the rubric. Okay, I didn't lump it in with APA format in general. If you're in doubt, use your style guide. Don't depend on something like Citation Machines. I love Citation Machine. It's a wonderful site. However, you've got to be careful with it because it works off of the information you feed it. If you feed it the wrong information, then your citation is wrong. So when in doubt, pull out that book. You need at least 5 references, including a reference for your measure that you're using. All of those references need to be cited in text in your paper. They should be listed in alphabetical order using a hanging indent. The whole document, including the references page, should be double-spaced with no extra space between entries. Your authors need to be listed correctly. Your title needs to be punctuated correctly, and your journal is in italics. You're going to include the volume in italics. The issue is not in italics, and then your DOI. So what does that look like? I included an example. So this is just a generic example, and it breaks it down by color so that you can see that your authors right here, remember, the thing you need to remember with them is if there are 2 initials, right, we're going to put a space between them. Remember also, if I've got 3 authors, the first time you cite that journal article in text, you cannot use et al. You must list out all authors. Okay? I gave that feedback to many of you in your literature review. Please incorporate it. You cannot use et al. The first time for an in-text citation. You must list all authors. Your year of publication is going to be right here. These should all be journal articles, guys. They should be a year, and that's it. There shouldn't be 2006, comma, May, none of the months. They shouldn't be there because peer-reviewed journal articles usually only use a year right there, okay? Next, you're going to list out your article title. Remember, the title is punctuated like a sentence. You punctuate the first word. You capitalize the first word. All of the other words that follow are lowercase unless you have a colon. If you have a colon, you capitalize the word directly after it, and you end the title with a period. Okay? Next, you italicize your journal. Okay, the title of it. You put a comma, a space, and then you also put the volume number or the volume number in parentheses. In italics, and then the issue goes in parentheses, and it is not in italics. And then don't forget the page numbers, guys. I know a lot of these online journals might not have page numbers that are obvious, but look at the top of the page of the journal article, and you can sometimes see up there where what pages it was on. If it has electronic page numbers, include that. Remember, you end your reference with a period, a space, and then you put your DOI there. This is how your DOI should be formatted, or it should actually say DOI : https://doi.org. It's got to say DOI at the beginning of it. It can't be just some random web page address that you've just pulled off the internet. The reason is this DOI is a digital identifier that would allow any researcher to go back and look at the vital information of that journal so they could go and pull it themselves. All right, next in your rubric is your writing clarity and mechanics. You get 10 points for grammar, spelling, punctuation, flow. Avoid using personal pronouns. Do not use I. I am going to research. This is a professional paper. We don't use first-person language, personal pronouns. We don't use that language in a research proposal. It's professional. Using first-person language stating with I statements is not considered professional. All right, your organization and flow. If you don't mess with the template, this section shouldn't need any work, okay? I will just kind of be looking at your in-paragraph flow, right? It should be easy to follow. It shouldn't be hard at all. And then everybody should have already earned the 5 points for creativity and originality because you proposed this research question back in the second week of class and we've discussed them and you've been working with them. And so that has already shown me thoughtfulness and original thinking. have to do this, guys. I hate saying this, but I've got to warn you about AI. For the love of all that is holy on this earth, do not use AI to write any part of this paper whatsoever. Don't run it through an AI checker. A grammar checker. Don't run it through anything except turn it in. Because this is an assignment that is major, and I will be taking into consideration your Turnitin scores, specifically your AI usage score. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to fail you because you have a high score, because I recognize that these AI detectors are not perfect, right? And unless I can see some version history as you've gone through with my template, which as far as I know can only be done through Google Docs, don't use Google Docs to open this template. It will eat the template and change things up, and we don't want that. Everybody has access to Word through your Microsoft account, through the university. Please use it. This paper is worth 30% of your grade. I want to see what you can do, not what some lines of Python code in ChatGPT can do. So the paper will go through Turnitin, and I will be deducting points for high AI usage. If your usage is 30 to 49%, 10 points is going to be deducted. This was not included in the rubric because this is overall at the end after I've analyzed your paper with the rubric. If your AI score is 50 to 74%, 20 points will be deducted. And if your AI usage score is 75% or above, I'm not going to grade your paper. You're going to earn a 0, okay? And I will also have to take action based on the academic integrity policy of the university and how it's stated in my syllabus, okay? There's no reason why any of you should have an AI score of 75% or above. And I'm going to be very blatantly honest with you guys. I've had some assignments that you guys have turned in that had 100% AI usage. That is hard to deny. 30% I can get behind, right? I could even go up to 50% and maybe, okay. But if I'm getting 100% of your paper flagged, something's not right. So if you're frustrated and you feel like you need help, where do you go? Well, you all have access to the Writing Center at UHCL, and I don't understand why people don't use this resource. They have made this one of the most accessible assistance formats that I've ever seen in any of university I've attended or worked at. So the Writing Center, their link is right here. Let's go look at what they have, because it's really awesome, all of the things that they have. So I want to get to it. So here's the Writing Center, right? And it's got a little video. You don't have to watch that, but they've got free face-to-face online drop-off and workshop-based consultations. You can make an appointment, 45 minutes long, or you can request an online drop-in consultation that they do over the internet here with you, 20 minutes long. First come, first served. It's amazing. You can drop your paper off and come back. There's a lot of things that they can help you with. I'm putting this video up early in the semester, relatively speaking. Usually I put it out a little later. But I want you to be able to take this to the Writing Center right now and get started on it if that's the level of assistance you need. There's nothing wrong with that. I want you to succeed. I want you to make a wonderful grade on this paper. And I want you to pass this course. And I want you to look back going, man, that paper I wrote for Dr. Gonzalez was a tough thing. And I did it, because that's how I felt when I finished writing my dissertation for my doctorate degree. There was a sense of pride behind that entire 200-page document. It was mine. I wrote it, every single word. And I wrote it relatively recently. In the past 7 years, there wasn't a ChatGPT to run it through back then. Yeah, we had Turnitin, but it didn't check for AI usage. So this is so new that the temptation to use it is so easy. And I get it. We don't want mistakes. We want high quality products. But it's not worth risking failing this course. And 30% of your grade is a significant part, right? So like I said, they've got drop-in consultations. You can make an appointment. It's first come, first served. Can last up to 20 minutes. And if you need more than one session, they do ask that you take a 30-minute break before the next one. I cannot tell you how much I recommend it, y'all. This is an excellent resource. Remember, your paper's 30% of your grade. There's free help to get you where you need to be. Please take it. Last thoughts. The paper is going to be due by May 9th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. That is the last day of the semester. Be careful. You have a cumulative final exam that is tough. It's open notes, but it's tough. It's going to cover every single module that we've covered in this class. So I'm telling you, it's about 80 to 90 questions. You'll have about 4 hours to do it. Don't wait until the last minute on May 9th to finish this paper, submit it, and take this exam. You've got other classes to be aware of. That's why I try to open the exams several days before they're due, and why I'm going over this and putting all of this information in Canvas right now so you have it. You're going to go in Canvas and you're going to submit it under the little submission spot under the final research project proposal paper module. Some people have had success in the past. They like to save their final document as a PDF, and that helps preserve formatting and can prevent some unwanted errors that might creep in with spacing or indentation. Feel free, it doesn't matter. You can save it as PDF or as a Word file. I don't care. Your template is in Canvas, the rubric is in Canvas, and this presentation and the video that I'm finishing right here are also going to be in Canvas as well. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out via email. Remember, for this assignment, there are no extensions because this is due on the last day of class. Thank y'all, and good luck to you. I have a great feeling about this. You're going to submit wonderful papers, and then I'm going to have a lot of grading to do, which is so much fun. So take care. Bye-bye.